Today, the agenda. Going to talk about the goals of the webinar. We're going to talk about how retirement income planning has changed. It has changed over the last couple of decades. The transition from accumulation to distribution, that's probably pretty transparent, but we'll talk about that, walk through that. And then what I call the three big secrets as to why annuities do work in retirement income planning strategies as a component, not as a standalone, but as a component. So one goal. I have one and only goal, folks. My goal is just to help you make an informed decision about annuities and how to use them either in pre-retirement as you're still in that accumulation stage, and or in retirement and looking at how can I use it effectively in my retirement planning. We've got a website, ourseniorjourney.com. That's the name of my company. YouTube channel. We've got a few videos up there trying to grow that out a little bit more. You can see that, and then a Facebook page. So feel free to get on those, like, subscribe, follow us. I try to post as much as I can, just give you facts, updates, real life scenarios. I call it I Got a Guy, I Got a Gal, that gives you some real life scenarios that maybe fit exactly your situation. So those are there. So here's another quote. It's not just the tool that you use, but how the tool is used. So this makes sense to a lot of things, and especially investments. But just take, for example, if you're going to hang a picture on the wall, depending on how you want that picture to hang on the wall is going to determine what kind of tool you use. So if you want it into a stud, then you're going to need a stud finder, hammer, nail, and a level. If you want to put that into drywall, then you're going to need, you're going to need the anchor. You're still going to need the hammer. You're still going to need the level. But you don't want to hit the stud, so you'll still need a stud finder. So just depending on how you do that project will be determined how you use or what tool you use. Same thing with investments. So whether it's stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, annuities, money markets, CDs, they're all tools. And that's what I really want you to make sure you understand, that an annuity that we're talking about today, or annuities that we're talking about today, are a tool. So just how do you use it effectively? Does it fit into your retirement income strategy? So it could be as simple as you want to just park money. And if you want to park money, there's one type of annuity that you want to use. If you want growth, there's another type of annuity you want to use. If you want income, there's another type of annuity you want to use. So when it comes to annuities as far as tools. So we'll talk about that as we go through it. How retirement income planning has changed. So I'm a baby boomer. Maybe some of you folks are baby boomers also that are out there in the audience. And, I think about my parents, my mom and dad. I just went and saw my mom last week up in Minneapolis. She's 93 years old. And we were talking about this, when her and my dad were working, they worked for companies that had pensions. So as they were planning for retirement, they felt pretty comfortable because they had pensions from their companies, they had Social Security, and then whatever money they could squirrel away and put into a little nest egg, they felt pretty confident. So you had these defined benefit plans, pensions through companies. But then in 1978, everything changed. So pensions started going away when the 401ks were introduced. So now in 1978, a lot of you out there, including myself, the risk went from the companies that had the pension plans, and some of them still do, don't get me wrong, they're still out there, but not nearly as many. But the 401k, the risk is now on you and I. So now we put the money into the market. We have to manage that or have somebody manage. But typically in a 401k, we're managing those, trying to get the most bang for our buck to accumulate as much money as we can. So we've got that. We've got Social Security. Some might still have a pension out there, and then whatever money you might want to squirrel away. But the other thing that's changed dramatically from back in the 70s, the 60s, and even into the 80s, I would say, is annuities in the upper right on that screen. Annuities have become much more prevalent when it comes to retirement income planning. And if you think about it, an annuity is much like a pension plan. It just happens to be a self-funded plan. So if you work for a corporation and they offer you a pension, when you retire, they're going to give you one of two options. I mean, several options to annuitize, but two basic options. Take the lump sum, get the taxes taken out, or roll it, or get an annuity in some form, a joint annuity, a period certain annuity, whatever that might be. It's just that we fund those, but they work the same. A pension is going to pay you a flat rate forever. From now until the time that you and or your spouse are still on this planet, that pension will pay out. Annuities are structured many times for retirement income planning the exact same way. So a lot of people, married couples, they'll buy a joint and survivor annuity. So if someone does pass early, that annuity continues to pay out for as long as that second spouse lives. That's a very common way to do it. Social Security is not unlike that, right? I mean, those of you that might already be on Social Security or are coming up on it, although those numbers will increase, not every year, but they're generally geared to increase, try to keep up with inflation. That's another form of pension and or annuity. We paid into that, and now we're going to reap the benefits on that as we get that paid out. So that's the big difference in how retirement income planning has changed, is the risk has shifted. So now the risk is on you. So we need to be a little bit more diligent on what it is that we're putting our money into. So why is making the transition from accumulation into distribution so important? It might seem obvious, and in a lot of ways it is. But when you're 35, 45, 55 years old and you're putting money away, in the accumulation stage, your mindset is different. You're thinking about, how can I maximize the rate of return that I'm going to get, because I want to get as most into that account as I possibly can. Distribution comes around, and if you're now looking at how are you going to get the money out, how do you get that money out most effectively? Has your risk tolerance changed? A lot of times people don't want to be 100% into the market. So if you think about it, and you can easily Google this, but the average rate of return in the stock market over time since the S&P 500 has been around is right around 10%. So the S&P 500, as we know it today, started in 1957. A smaller version of it was available all the way back to 1923. So that 10% average rate of return is typically quoted over that 102-year period. So in 1994, a guy named William Bengen, a financial planner, came up with something called the 4% rule. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. People have used 4%, 5%, 6%, but the 4% rule is pretty straightforward. It really just says that no matter how much money you set aside for retirement, if you take 4% out in the first year, adjust that for inflation every year thereafter, you should feel comfortable that you'll never run out of money. That was the theory. Now, that was back in 1994. Now, when William Bengen passed away, I shouldn't say passed away, when he retired, got way ahead of myself. When he retired, he was asked, are you going to use the 4% rule? And he said, no. He said, there's too much new information out there, and we'll talk about what that is. But the 4% rule was a little too static, for lack of a better word. The market doesn't move just like that. And the other thing to keep in mind is when we turn 65, which is the typical retirement age, getting a little later now as full retirement age goes out to 67, 68 years old. But at that point, our life expectancy is 20 to 25 years. We don't have 102 years to get that 10% rate of return. So now we've got this smaller window. So now you have to ask yourself these good questions. Do I still want to take the same risk that I did when I was in my 40s and 50s, putting all the money into the market? Now, if it is, that's fine. If that's what you want to do and you want to ride that absolutely no problem with that. It's, your retirement is going to be 100% tied to whatever the market does, up or down. And of course, right now the market's at all-time highs. The thing that we don't know, any of us, as we get into retirement, we don't know what kind of market we're going to retire into. So we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. Some examples of what that looks like and how that can affect your retirement. So typical income strategies in retirement, there's two of them. The one on the left side of the screen, taking withdrawals from a market-based portfolio. Kind of what I just said. If you're still risk tolerant and you want to leave 100% of your money in the market, a lot of people still use that 4% rule, even though there are some drawbacks to it that we'll talk about it. But a lot of people will blend that. They'll go to a 60-40 conservative type fund, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, or 55-45, whatever that might be. The problem with that, of course, is when you take that mixture, you don't have that same 10% average rate of return. In fact, if you have a 55-45% mixture, the average rate of return on that over time is, I think, 6.2% is what I saw most recently. And that's not adjusted for inflation. So when people look at that, they say, well, maybe that's just a little bit too risky for income and maybe a little bit too conservative for growth. So in some way, it's possibly the worst of both worlds because your hands are kind of tied. The other thing that you're up against is you're up against market risk and sequence of returns risk, which we'll talk about in a minute. And so the question is that way too much risk for that current time of your life, for that current season? The other thing that people do, and some people are forced into this, unfortunately, is just trying to live off fixed interest only. And under that scenario, you're going to look for the highest paying dividend stock or municipal bond or CD, whatever that might be. The problem is that you're subject to whatever the interest rate environment is. So think about the people that retired in 2008 when they brought interest rates down to basically zero and they kept them there for about 12 years. I always wondered, my parents at that time, a lot of people as they're retired and on that portion of their fixed income, whatever those dollars were, they just weren't getting any kind of money out of that. Now the rates have come back up the last 3 or 4 years. Talk about them going down, but we'll see what happens. But if that's the strategy you're going to use, if you're super conservative, 100% conservative, and you go that route, tied to whatever the current interest rate environment is, you've got no compound interest on the principal because whatever you get in the form of a dividend coupon interest, you're going to pull that out and live off of it. So nothing is compounding, nothing's growing. So the problem with that is it just ties up way too much principal for not enough income in return. So those are the two big ones. So I talked about three big secrets, and I just mentioned this one, secrets of returns. The big secret number one, what I call big secret number one, the thing, in fact, I put it in the email, the one thing that can alter your retirement would be sequence of returns. So remember, I talked about the 4% rule. So you put your money in, you take the 4% out, adjust that for inflation, and then hopefully everything, moves along in a nice static way. But we know it doesn't work. So on the screen, I use this example, brother and sister, George and Jane, both going to retire. We go back to 1998. George, they both have to back up. They both have $500,000 in their account. They're both going to take $30,000 per year. They're going to withdraw that for their retirement. So George, left side of the screen, he retires in 1998. The market is rocketing for the next 2 years. It's up 26.5%. It's almost up 20% in year two. So he's looking pretty good. There's, the money, the account is growing. But poor Jane, she decides to retire 2 years later. So 2 years later is the year 2000. And again, we don't know what kind of market we're going to retire into. So this is an example of what can happen. So she retires in the year 2000, and now all of a sudden we hit the tech bubble. The tech bubble lasts 3 years. So we have three, bad years in the market. She's taking $30,000 a year out, but look what happens to her money. So by year three, taking that $30,000 a year out and the negative rates of return, those sequence of returns, she's down to less than half the amount of money that she had in the beginning of her plan. And as you can see, it just runs out by year 12 and she's out of money. So she's going to have to make a decision. She's going to have to either cut back on that 30,000 withdrawal, or she's going to have to change her lifestyle, which none of us want to do. But sometimes we're just subject to that. So for that 70-year period, 1953 to 2023, the S&P recorded 17 negative years. And I show that just to let you know that just basically means there's a 1 in 4 chance that there's going to be a negative rate of return in any given year. So 2 to 3 years in any given decade. You just don't know when you're going to retire into it. And now you've got to manage. So when the market's down, do I take less money out? Because that's kind of a snowball effect. How do you do that? And that's what we're going to talk about. Ways that you can maybe try and overcome that. Another quote, Warren Buffett, if you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. Basically, he's just saying, is there a way that you can find a way to get passive income, some sort of income that you don't have to worry about getting the second job, working longer than you want to into retirement. We're just looking for ways that we can put our money to work the best way we can. And one of the answers to that, or one of the suggestions based on that quote, would be annuities. So we'll talk about that. So annuity objections. I've been in this business, like I said, for 33 years. So I've heard a lot of objections. I've heard a lot of things that people say, and I also know the realities. So the one question I get a lot is, an annuity good or bad? And it's not enough of a question. You need to go a little bit deeper, because that just all depends. It depends on your situation. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish, number one. But a better question might be, is what one job within retirement, because we're talking about that, is an annuity best suited for? And that answer to that is income. They're stable, it's predictable, it's contractually guaranteed, which you need to keep in mind that this isn't, it's safe for a down economy. So when you buy a guaranteed fixed annuity, a fixed indexed annuity, typically, you know exactly what you're going to get. and you use that in conjunction with other tools, Social Security, a pension that you might have, things like that, to take care of all the must-haves like food, housing, shelter, things like that. If you can swing that, it's a lot of times it's used just to fill in the gaps. The one thing that you can't do, no financial product does this except an annuity, and it's important, is that you can't outlive or outlast a guaranteed income annuity. So you can put money in the market, you can put money into individual stocks, bonds, whatever it might be, international funds. But the one thing that those won't do is that they can't guarantee what that rate of return is going to be. They can't guarantee what kind of income that you might be able to get on a consistent basis. The other one of the big myths is that you don't tie up your money forever. A lot of people have said that over the years. And I will say this, annuities 20, 25 years ago, they had some long surrender charge periods. And it did feel like you could be tying up your money for way too long. And it was very frustrating. They didn't have the withdrawal provisions that they have now. So, and frankly, some of the costs were high. So, but that's changed. That has changed completely in the last 20 plus years. And products are so much better for people out there now. It's not even close. But I do like to talk about the top 10 myths. I call them myths, but maybe some of the top 10 comments that a lot of people make. You might even read this online, but number one, annuities are too expensive. And the reality is some of them are. There's some annuities that are the fees inside of those things are just too high. Variable annuities are annuities I would never use for an income producing situation for retirement, because you're going to participate in the highs of the market. You're also going to participate in the lows. The fees are maybe 3 to 4 times higher. I think they're great if you're younger and you've got a lot of time on your side. That's an accumulation vehicle. It's not a great income vehicle, in my opinion. I think it's a great accumulation. But immediate and fixed annuities, those do have low or sometimes, no ongoing fees. Once you get past a surrender charge period of, say, 7 to 10 years, those fees go away. So it's just really crucial to understand the type. Number two, I'll lose all my money if I die early. Not anymore. A lot of annuities now offer death benefit riders. So it's not life insurance, but you can get a life insurance component, or you can get refund options. So you've got options. And that's the thing to keep in mind, is that there's different things you can look at. There are so many companies out there, so many annuities. My job is to make sure we're looking at the ones that are strong companies, only A rated or better. We're not going to get involved with companies that are just trying to bring us into the game because they've got some new whiz bang great bonus interest rate. I kind of hate those because they're great in the beginning, but they can kind of bite you in the end. Number three, annuities are only for retirees, and that's not true. Pre-retirees, people that are accumulating. If you're in a situation where you've maxed out your 401k or Roth 401k, and you've got some extra money set aside and you're trying to accumulate, annuities can be a great place to put them. You can put them deferred annuities. You don't have to put it in a lump sum. You could pay it over time and gear that towards income down the road. And when we talk about how those things pay out versus other products, you might be a little bit surprised. So they're good. So for before retirement and in retirement, if you're out there right now in the audience and you are retired, absolutely no reason that you can't be looking at annuities right now. You can still look at annuities while you're in retirement. We can talk about that. Number four, I can get better returns elsewhere. That might be true. I mean, the market typically does outperform annuities, but the thing you got to keep in mind is we're not trying to compare apples to apples, or let me reword that. It's not apples to apples to compare annuities to investments. They're two different vehicles. Remember, I talked about tools. This is not to say I'm going to put my money and move it all over into an annuity. This is more like how much makes sense to put into an annuity to cover some income gaps that's going to give you more room and, frankly, more peace of mind to actually invest the money in the market, probably take a little more strategic risk than you could have before. So you can get better returns, but getting the peace of mind, the thing that you can't get with any other product is the longevity protection. That's something you can't get with really anything. Income stability, and again, it's contractually guaranteed. All annuities are the same. I'm going to talk about those 4 annuities, so we'll get to those. But no, they're not the same, and they have different. Each annuity has a different role, so we just need to understand that. Touched on this a little bit. Number 6, I can't get my money out once I buy an annuity. Again, I would say 25 years ago it would have been much tougher, but nowadays there are withdrawal provisions put in. And most common, I would say, by example, is that you can always get 10% per year starting in year 2 if you need to get to it. I'll also say, if you buy an annuity for an income stream down the road, that's not your goal. Your goal is not to take money out year 2, 3, 4, 5 as just a pure withdrawal. You might design it to start taking an income guaranteed the rest of your life in year 3, 4, 5. That could works all the time. But they do have surrender periods. So you want to just make sure you're aware of those in each product and make sure you're not getting hit on any kind of charge if you're taking out a partial withdrawal. But again, most of them, they have those built in. So I'm pretty comfortable with being able to get access to your money. Number 7, annuities don't keep up with inflation. They didn't used to, but now you can build in inflation riders. So they've got inflation adjusted annuities. You can have income annuities where you start out with a lower number to begin with, and it rises with inflation every single year. So you can go along with it all the way through retirement. So again, you can design them so much better. Only people without pensions need annuities. And that's just not true because, again, we're talking about filling income gaps. If you've got an income of X and your income vehicles, pensions and or Social Security only are X, maybe 50% of X, maybe getting an annuity to cover that fixed portion of your needs makes sense with an annuity. And then again, the rest goes into some form of investment for longer term. I can do better with my own investments. Some savvy investors can, and by all means, if you're really good at that, then go for that. Again, we're not talking about putting this up against mutual funds or stocks, individual stocks especially, but you've just got to, we're trying to take care of some of those risks, sequence of returns, longevity, behavioral mistakes. How many people panicked during COVID or even recently in April this year when the market was down 15%? Sometimes people make big mistakes because they just say, oh, it's too much risk. And by the way, if you're losing sleep when you see those things, then you really got to be careful about how much money you have in the market, because that can be brutal. And then the last one, annuities are a scam. And again, I've been doing this a long time, so that's just one of those comments that I do hear sometimes out there. But they're regulated insurance products. And I've worked for insurance companies. I've worked with insurance companies. The only products I use, and that is, again, my job to make sure that we're using products that just, they've been through it all. They've been through the ups and downs of different economies, and they still stand the test of time. Plenty of very good companies, plenty of very good products out there. The issue is typically poor product fit or, frankly, mis-selling. And yes, I think in this industry, just like in many industries, there's people out there that only do this for the buck for themselves. Hate to say that, but I know it's true. But that usually might be the case. When we sit down and talk, we really talk about exactly what it is you're trying to accomplish. If it makes sense, we give you some ideas and give you some suggestions. If it doesn't make sense, we'll tell you. It's pretty much as straightforward as that. Let me give you a real example. So getting into a real example of an income annuity. And this is something from, I want to say, the beginning of the year. We had a 67-year-old guy. He's going to retire next year. He did really well. This guy did really well for himself. So part of his nest egg, and just part, so obviously did really well. Part of his nest egg is $1 million IRA rollover. And he was talking about keeping that portion of his rollover money very conservative. Didn't want to really put it in the market if he didn't have to. So we talked about those different options. So we said, okay, with that, if you'd have to tie up that entire $1 million with a 5% CD to produce $50,000 a year of income. And then you're subject to whatever those interest rate movements are. So if the interest rates go up, then you're going to get a little bit more. If they go down, then you're going to get a little bit less. You're going to pay taxes on that every single year because that's a distribution of income on that CD. On the other hand, you could take $700,000 of that, so 70%, $700,000 of that principal. You put it into a good lifetime guaranteed income annuity, and in his case, we were able to produce over $63,000 a year of guaranteed income, guaranteed lifetime income. So that's in the contract. So folks, that's 26% more income over and above that $50,000 in a CD using 30% less principal. We'll talk about how annuities can do that, how insurance companies do that, because that's important. But that's a big difference. And that's something that you don't have to worry about it ever moving. You're not worried about interest rate adjustments. It's contractually guaranteed. So in that scenario, he had $700,000 that he could put into that and get a much larger income. but he still had the $300,000 left over. Now he can take more strategic risk with that. He can put that back into his bucket of long-term growth vehicles to use for retirement down the road in whatever fashion he wants to use it for. So those are very common examples. All right. What are the different types of annuities? So we've got immediate annuities, fixed annuities, variable annuities, and then fixed indexed annuities. So immediate annuities also are referred to as a SPIA, a single premium immediate annuity. And these are pretty straightforward. So just think about this. You've got a lump sum of money. You give it to the insurance company. The insurance company then guarantees that they're going to give you an income stream paid out for a set amount of time, for as long as, they can do it 5 years, 10, 20, 30 years. You can set it up for life. So you can fund that with cash, with retirement accounts. The principal is protected. There's no negative returns in this because you're getting that guaranteed return, and you've got tax deferred growth. So a good example of what that, from an analogous standpoint, would be the lottery. So let's say you go out and you get the $1 million winning ticket. The lottery is going to give you two options. You're either going to be able to take it as a lump sum, and you'll get taxed on that. So whatever state you live in, and federal and state tax, you could be as low as 40% that you get back, but 40, 50%. Don't get me wrong. You get $500,000, you won a lottery, great deal. The other option they give you is to annuitize. And I don't know the stats on this. I don't know if anybody ever annuitizes because it's just too tempting to get the lump sum. It's use of money, and I totally get that. But you can annuitize it, and they would pay you out over a 30-year period. So they would give you they would take that $1 million and divide it exactly by 30. So $33,333, and pay you that every single year for the next 30 years. You'd get the whole $1 million that way, by the way. Still going to pay tax every year off that $33,000, but you get the full $1 million as opposed to what you get with the lump sum. That's the best way to describe what a SPIA is. Now, remember I said earlier, if you need to just park money, and we just gave that example of the guy with a CD maybe at 5%, sometimes getting an immediate annuity is a better way to do that. If you're going to park money and then need it for income down the road. But there's also another one that might be a little bit better for parking money, which we'll talk about. And that would be this one, the fixed annuity. Fixed annuity are also a MYGA, a multi-year guaranteed annuity. So the best way to look at this is it earns interest at fixed rates, and it's very similar to a CD or a money market. So for example, the guy that I just talked about that could get 5% in a CD, which I still think is the best rate, give or take a little bit right now in the market. The best rate in a MYGA, in a monthly year guaranteed fixed annuity, is 6.05%. And that's guaranteed, contractually guaranteed for 5 years. So if you actually were in a situation where you just needed to set aside money and you knew it was for 5 years, you didn't need to get it out, you don't want to worry about penalties or paying taxes early or whatever, a MYGA versus a CD is a phenomenal way to go, because in that scenario, you're getting 20% more income than you would be with a CD. And again, contractually guaranteed with the insurance company. So why not take a look at that? So that's what a MYGA is, a fixed annuity in that scenario. The variable annuity we touched on a little bit before, and this is the annuities here, again, I think are great for younger people that have got the time, because this money is tied directly to the market in the sense that you give the money to the insurance company. You invest the money into something it's lookalikes, indexes, bonds, not individual stocks, but investments that you choose. Now you're subject to whatever the market does. So if you have a great year, if you're up 15%, you're going to get that whole 15%. If the market's down 15%, you're going to have a 15% hit. If you have the 3-year tech bubble routine, you're going to be down 3 years in a row. So why I don't really like to use these for income, because again, you don't know what if you were setting that aside and specifically saying, I'm going to pull that out for income, and then all of a sudden you're pulling out a chunk of money and the market's down 10, 15%, you've just had a snowball effect. You've taken a chunk out for yourself and the value of that is down. So to get that value back, much harder. So I just think there's better vehicles for that. Great if you're younger. And the other thing is these typically have higher costs. So I tend to stay away from the higher cost vehicles, because I do this for myself too, folks. I'm like anybody else. Don't need to pay any extra fees if I don't have to. The one that we use really 100% of the time when we're talking about guaranteed income annuities is a fixed indexed annuity. So the difference here is it's still attached to the market. You're still correlated, like I guess I have on the screen is a better way to put it. So you give the money to the insurance company, you tie that, correlate it to the S&P 500, for example. And there are a lot of companies, by the way, that will have it correlated to 10 different indexes, the Hang Seng Index, the Stocks 50. But honestly, I don't know how many people follow those indexes. If you do, maybe it's fine to put your money in that. Most people understand the S&P 500, something that we here in America we do. So you go along on an annual return. They call it point to point. So you put the money in July 1st, and then June 30th of next year, 12 months later, whatever that S&P 500 index grew or declined by. If it grew 10%, and by the way, there's caps in these. They'll cap it at a certain level. So getting ahead of myself, they'll cap it. You'd get that 10%. The big kicker in these products is that there is a floor of zero. So if the market is negative in any given year, zero is your hero. You will always, the worst case scenario is you will always get at least a 0% credit to your account, even if the market is down. Again, you're going to be capped on a higher number, but then it just depends on which product it is and where you're getting the most bang for your buck. You can fund these with cash or retirement accounts. So you can put these in your IRAs. People do it all the time. Your principal's protected. There's no negative returns ever. So that's a nice deal, and it's tax deferred. So 3 big keys to the FIAs, we call them fixed indexed annuities, are the caps, the floor, and the income. So here's an example of the cap. So this is pretty common. You might have a 10.5% cap on a product. So if the market's up 15% positive, you would get that whole 10.5%, or I'm sorry, if the market's up 15% and the cap is 10.5, you would get only 10.5. You're not going to get the rest of it. You're capped at that 10.5%. But it's a give and take. So if the market's down 15%, you're going to get zero. You'll get credited 0% as opposed to losing 15%. That's the big key inside of a fixed indexed annuity, is that even though you've got the cap, you never experience a negative number, which is a really big deal. Maybe one of the best ways to explain it, hopefully a lot of people have played blackjack or at least understand it. So there's 3 outcomes to a hand of blackjack, right? If you go to a casino, first one is you can either win, second one you could push, and the third one is that you could lose, right? So you got a win, push, or a loss. Those are the 3 things that can happen in blackjack. Now, assume for a minute you walk into the casino, and off to the right is this special table, and the sign up there says, look, the outcome here is only a win or only a push. You cannot lose. The rule is that you have to stay at the table for a set amount of time. That's like an annuity, fixed income annuity. So you can only win or push. You just have to stay in it for X amount of time, or at least you don't have to stay 100% in it. Remember, there's withdrawal provisions, but that's what you're trying to accomplish. Stay in it during the surrender charge period. So then there's no charges. But by the way, if you pull that out, if you start withdrawing off a fixed income annuity prior to your surrender charge period, it basically negates it. It doesn't affect it, because you've guaranteed in your contract that now I'm going to take X amount of dollars per year forever. So they basically waive that surrender charge at that point. So the products have just gotten a whole lot better. So fixed indexed annuity, it's a win or a push, worst case scenario. Zero is your hero. So let's take a look at this. We'll go back to that sequence of returns, George and Jane, and now we'll say let's assume that they actually had put this money into an annuity with that 10.5% cap. So on the right there, as it comes up, everything in red is a negative rate of return in the market over those years. Everything in blue is anything over 10.5%. And then everything that's not highlighted is anywhere between 0 and 10.5. So they get whatever that rate of return is. So we look at Jane's scenario. Remember, she was less than half the money after year 3. But in this scenario, when she was less than half, when she was taking $30,000 a year out, if she's got it into this annuity under this scenario, she's taking the $30,000 out per year times 3. So she got $90,000 out in withdrawals. But that annuity is now worth $410,000 versus $238, because 0 is her hero. She got a 0 credit years 1, 2, and 3. So that worked out really well. Year 10 looks like that is up there, $96,000 that she had under the old scenario. In this case, in year 10, she would still have $421,000 sitting in that account, and she would have withdrawn $30,000 per year out of that annuity. So $300,000 of income and she's got all of that accumulation still sitting there. Now, under the old scenario and sequence of returns, she's completely out of money under the old way. But in this one, she would have received $600,000 of income, $30,000 a year times the 20 years, and she'd still have a cash value of $455,000. So I know that's a dramatic example, and she happened to get into the market at the worst possible time. It's just to point out that because of the sequence of returns, you just have to be cognizant that it's there. And does an annuity make sense to say, okay, why don't I put a chunk in here and guarantee something for my must-haves? Again, food, shelter, whatever, those couple of things, and then have more strategic risk with the rest of the dollars. We ran the numbers on George also. He'd have over $600,000 of cash value after taking out $600,000. So the fixed annuity with the sequence of returns in that scenario can be very dramatic on the value of your account. And that's why we like to look at these and at least say, does something make sense? Does a portion make sense? Does 10% of your bucket of money make sense? 15%, something like that? The big keys to the FIAs are the riders. So it's the guaranteed lifetime income rider. You add that to it, and that gives you that guaranteed income. A lot of people like to add long-term care. If you buy a standalone long-term care product right now, they're very expensive. But one good way to get long-term care is actually to buy an annuity. You can have a guaranteed income annuity, and you could have a long-term care rider on it. And if you trigger the long-term care rider, let's say you had an annuity and it was saying, I'm paying you $1,500 a month, and you trigger the long-term care with 2 of 6 ADLs, activities of daily living. You probably heard of all that. So now that $1,500 in several products will actually double, and they'll actually give you $3,000 a month, and they'll give you that for 5 straight years. If you're still going, they're going to back it off after 5 years, but you had 5 years of double the income by adding that long-term care rider. So it's a nice way to combine both, give yourself a guaranteed income and also cover yourself in a long-term care situation, which right now, frankly, you've got hybrid riders added onto life insurance, standalone products, which are pretty expensive, or riders added to annuities. So you've got 3 ways that you can do it by adding that. Just depends on how you want to optimize your particular situation. So guaranteed income approach, couple of examples. Guaranteed income approach on this, you've got a $500,000 bucket available, let's say. So 59-year-old single female, she's looking for $44,000 of annual income. This was actually a real scenario a couple months ago. She was looking for $44K. So we kind of worked backwards. We said, okay, well, what's it going to take to get there? And she'd obviously done very well for herself, her and her husband. So it was going to take $378,000 for her to generate $43,000 of annual income. Now the payout, that's going to start at age 65. So she's not taking it right away. So this is deferring that, putting the money in now, deferring it when she's 65. She'll be able to pull out that $43,877, and that's guaranteed. Now again, these numbers, you can drop a 0 and that number you just drop the last number on the other end and it works the exact same. But that's a payout rate of 11.6% based on that $500,000. And it's a payout rate, not an interest rate. So that 11.6% is $43,877 divided into that $500,000. So you can't get that kind of payout rate on any financial product out there. That's one of the things that makes it so great. Now she had that $500,000. She takes $378 out, so she's still got $121,690 left. She can put that back into the market. So if we just use those saved numbers from back in 2000, even with those bad first 3 years, that $121,000, and this was weird because when I put that in there, it came out to basically the same amount of money she pulled out. But after 20 years, she's not worried about sequence of returns because she's not going to pull money out of that account, or not geared to. She probably will for something. But if she didn't, and it just sat there, it grows all the way back to the amount of money she put into that annuity. So just an example of that. Another one, smaller bucket, a little bit smaller, $400,000. $100,000 for a 63-year-old single female would generate $1,508 per month, guaranteed income starting at age 72. So another one that says, I'm going to put the money in, but I'm going to wait 9 years, basically at RMDs, when she has to take out that required minimum distribution and pull that money out. That's an 18.1% payout rate. So that's pretty phenomenal. No other financial product's going to, give you that opportunity. She can let that other $300,000 grow, again, taking more strategic risk, and you can see what that grows to more than doubles over that 20-year period. And by the way, that 20-year period is one of the worst 20-year periods in the market, oddly enough, even though we had up years, but we had those big down years. So just examples of what you can do, depending on what size bucket that you've got available. So why would you utilize a fixed indexed lifetime income annuity in your distribution plan? That's the big question, the question you should ask yourself. We talked about secret number one, sequence of returns. You have to keep that in mind because you just have to be aware. You don't know what you're retiring into. You don't know what the market's going to do. If you are more risk averse than you were when you're in your accumulation years, then maybe an annuity is going to make sense for a portion. Secret number two, I touched on these payout rates. The payout rate is not the interest rate. It's when you calculate in an annuity and you say, I'm going to give a company $50,000 and they're going to give me $700 a month starting in 5 years or 6 years or 7 years. The payout rate is then calculated and say, okay, what 700 divided by the 50,000 is X. 65-year-old ballpark is guaranteed around an 8% payout. 75-year-olds 9 to 10%, and an 80-year-old's guaranteed around 13% if they qualify for the annuity, which many of them do. No other financial vehicle will do that based on age. You can't walk into the bank and say, hey, I'm 65 years old, 70 years old. Can I get a little bit higher kick on that CD because I need it for retirement? They're not going to do it. You can't talk to your broker and say, I've got this really good dividend paying stock that I'd like to enter into. Will they pay me more? Of course, it's not going to happen. So another real life example, just to give you an idea. So because this gives you two options. So this 59-year-old female, she bought a $150,000 joint and survivor annuity. So this annuity is going to be there forever. One spouse passes away, it's going to pay for the other spouse forever. So the plan for her in this scenario was to take income in 5 or 10 years. If she does it in 5 years, she's going to get $14,760 per year guaranteed for life. That's a 9.8% payout rate. If she does it in the 10th year, she's going to get $23,160 per year guaranteed for life. So that's 15.4%. So if you think about that, the number that gets bigger is just like Social Security. If you take your money at 62, you're going to get X. If you wait till 65, you're going to get X plus 8% per year over the next 3 years. If you do it, 10 years from now, you're going to get even more money. And then secret number three, mortality credits. That's really what I call the secret sauce inside of a annuity. So what it is, it's a financial benefit. It's a pooled risk annuity product. So like a guaranteed lifetime income annuity. So what happens is a bunch of people buy a particular annuity. They all fund it with all the money that they put into it to guarantee an income down the road. But insurance companies are very good with actuarial tables. So they know people are going to, some are going to die sooner, some are going to die later. So some members of the group die early. And when that happens, all the unused funds remain in that pool and it just increases that payout. And that's what makes the payout rates of annuities so much better than any other financial product. So mortality credits, people don't talk about. Not really sure why, because it's really kind of the big deal. So kind of wrapping up here, optimize your guaranteed income portion of your retirement distribution plan. That's the other reason you want to look at this with an annuity, because you can help mitigate the sequence of returns risk that we talked about. The big one in the far right middle, longevity risk. Like I've said, no other product will actually take care of longevity risk like a guaranteed annuity. No other financial product can do it. And then a couple of bucket strategies. So I'm big on the bucket strategies, a flexibility approach or a bucket strategy. So we've got the green, 2 blacks, and a red bucket. In this scenario, some people do it this way. And I talk to people about this. You might just have an income bucket. You say, okay, I've got Social Security, I've got pensions. Maybe some of you have VA pensions, rental income, people have that, royalties, and income annuities. And you have this income bucket. And you design that to take care of the fixed costs that you have. So let's say you have fixed costs of $4,000 a month. If you can get to a point where your Social Security and your pensions, if you've got them, and an income annuity can take care of the $4,000 per month, then the rest of your account can be geared towards longer term to use for strategic investment risk that you want to use. So that's one way to look at it. And then That covers the basic needs. And then you've got additional income that you can take out of these other buckets. You're going to have required minimum distribution. So the two black buckets, money could be in the stock market, money could be in other types of annuities. As an example, could we all be in the stock market? Some is going to, and then what you do is you decide. So if the market's in a positive scenario, that's a good time to take money out for your RMD. Market's up, go ahead and take a little bit of money out. Your account's doing good. If you have an annuity and you just want to take a withdrawal, you can take it out of that because it's more fixed and you don't have to worry about the value of that going down because you've got a 0% floor. That's an option. So you've got a negative market return, good time to take it out of that particular bucket. So this just gives you options by using this particular strategy. Then, of course, the far right, the red bucket, that one is for emergencies, whatever those might be, money in the bank. Another approach that people use, just a little bit different, but this is a way a lot of people look at this, is starting from right to left. So in the red bucket, we call it the near term or now bucket. So some people, when they retire, they've set aside money they don't have to pull out of their retirement accounts, but it's cash accounts. So they can pull that money out of that bucket. And let's say that's going to last for 3 years. And after 3 years, and that bucket drains. So the red one drains. The arrows are going the wrong way. So we started at the end. If the red one drains, you go to that next bucket, the midterm bucket, which in a lot of people's scenario is 3 to 7 years. So now in that bucket, you're going to have different things, more growth type vehicles, bonds, dividend paying stocks, and you could have fixed income annuities. A lot of people, what they'll do is they'll put money set aside into an annuity and they won't pull it out until maybe 3, 5, 7 years into retirement. But again, it's really up to you. You could be immediately, it could be 10 years from now, it could be 15 years from now. What makes the most sense, depending on the buckets you've got. As one bucket drains, you move to the next bucket. But some of those have guaranteed components like Social Security, pensions, and annuities, like the last screen. So it's just a way to do it. Midterm or next bucket, 3 to 7 years. Long-term bucket could be 7+ years. And then a future bucket could be 10+ years, where you're really taking more aggressive investments, things that you don't have to touch that money for at least 10 years. And you feel confident that you can ride that out. So we look at both of these, kind of depends on where you fall in the risk tolerance equation, but we can look at different ways to look at the buckets and what makes most sense to put into each of those buckets. If any of you folks out there have annuities right now and you haven't had them reviewed, I highly recommend getting them reviewed, either the people that you're currently working with, and if you don't have someone you're working with, then we will review them. And we'll be very frank with you. You're fine. Stay where you're at. Don't do anything. You've got too much of a surrender charge period, still inside this product. Don't pull it out. It's going to hurt you. Or interest rates have risen and participation rates in fixed annuities have gotten way better. So maybe it makes sense to move it over in what's called a 1035 exchange. Doesn't cost you anything. There's no taxable event. Move it over and put yourself in a better position. So if you haven't had your annuities renewed, all we need is like the page that shows what kind of an annuity is, what all the charges are, surrender charges, things like that. And then we can put that into our software and say, okay, this makes sense to do this, or this makes sense to stay where you're at. But get them reviewed. It's just like homeowners insurance, auto insurance, anything else. You should always be looking at these things and making sure you're maximizing everything that you can when it comes to that. So how to prioritize your retirement goals. The whole idea here, folks, is that you try to use the tools that are available to you to cover the needs, the fixed needs, and an income annuity can be a portion of that. You really want to focus on the wishes and the wants. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you're trying to be a financial planner daily, weekly, monthly, worried about what the market's going to do. Try and come up with a plan that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable that you've got most, if not all, of the fixed income needs taken care of, and then you can work on the rest with your broker as far as what you want to do long term. Lastly, Steve Jobs, I think he died at age 58, but Steve Jobs, had this quote: "It's really clear that the most precious resource we all have is time." And unfortunately, I think he died maybe as the richest man in the world at the time at age 58. But the one thing money couldn't buy was time. And all of us, as we get into our retirement years, our time gets a little bit shorter. So we have to make sure we're making the smartest decisions for ourselves. And the two biggest decisions are retirement and Medicare, in my opinion. And we do both. So whether if you're looking at that, talk to us. If you're looking at retirement income distribution strategies, we'd love to talk to you because time is short and we want to do it right. So there should be that box up above everything that you can click on. If you do want to schedule a time with me, I'd love to talk to you. If you want to you'd see a calendar like this, by the way. It'll have blocked out if there's times that I can't be or they're already taken. But it opens up over the next 7 days. But if, let's say, 7 days doesn't work and you just have a question, if you have a question, that's my phone number. That's my email. You can text me. You can call me. You can shoot me an email and say, hey, Brad, I just have a question about this. What do you think? Whatever it might be. I mean, I am happy to help you in any way possible. So that is it.